Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Britain's Hangout Hour, episode 153. I am here with Steven Powell today, um, who is very kind to join me. He is the. Would you say you are the biographer of James Ellroy?
Yes, indeed. Hello, Britton. Hello, everyone who's watching and listening. Yes, I'm James Ellroy's biographer, but I suppose over the course of my life, of the past 20 years, I've I've got to know him. I've been his friend, his confidant, and much more than that. So, yeah, we'll get into that. But yes, I am his biographer.
Yeah, it's I actually found your channel Elroy Reads a while back, and I've quite enjoyed it. I don't want to talk about Elroy the entire time. I would also
Sure.
like to ask about, you personally as well. But I'm sure Elroy will come up a bit in this because, you spent a lot of your life talking about him
Yeah.
and writing
Yeah.
about him.
Yes, it's a somewhat dubious distinction, but I'm at the stage now where I'm very happy about it. Yeah, he has taken up a huge part of my life. I mean, he's a big guy. He's I wouldn't say bombastic, but like a big personality, very charismatic, and big, huge figure in American literature. So yeah, he is the type of guy you either obsess over or you kind of just ignore.
Yes, that's what I've noticed with Elroy. Once you start, it's really hard to stop,
Mhm.
which is kind of interesting because he also has a lot to say about obsession as well,
Mhm.
particularly in the LA Quartet, which is what I'm most familiar with. Um, but yeah, so yeah, you're his biographer. So yeah, I'm glad
Mhm.
you managed to. I'm glad you said yes. I was pleasantly surprised that you said yes.
Oh, I was delighted to be invited, and I actually got quite a lot of these kind of invitations for internet shows, and I've done quite a lot of them. More when the book first came out, but subsequently, I'm always happy to do them. I think they reach a great audience, and I think it's a new part of the market. And I think there's a lot of great guys on the web who are really, really carving a niche for themselves, and do great work. So I got no book.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I've been doing this for a while, so yeah. Also, I said this in our initial emails. I appreciate people who take genre fiction seriously. You take crime fiction seriously. I mean, you cover Elroy, but I've seen you cover other pieces of crime fiction. You've
Mhm.
I mean, you did a compilation of like the 100 best crime writers, if I remember correctly.
Yes, that was one of my first academic projects. I did, yeah, the book was called 100 American Crime Writers. I had a colleague, Esme Miskimen, who did a companion volume called 100 British Crime Writers. And it is basically an anthology of biographies and literary criticism on the said 100 writers. It was very difficult to narrow the list down to 100 because there are thousands of crime writers,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously each one has made their mark, and to narrow it down to a list of 100 most important was actually the most difficult job, right at the beginning. But yeah, I mean, I love many crime writers. I mean, here in Britain, PD James is a brilliant crime writer, as was Mo Hader, who I'm doing a lot of research on now. um, Scandinavian, obviously the Scandinavians have done incredible crime fiction. Henning Mankell, Joe Nesbo.
Yeah,
um,
one of my favorite trilogies is the Millennium trilogy. Though, I mean, would you call
yeah.
that noir, or is that just like a thriller? I consider it noir. It's very noirish.
Yeah, I consider it noir. I mean, one thing where Aaron and I kind of disagreed is like he was quite pedantic about genre labels, and I wasn't, and I'm not. If I feel like literature is always kind of fluid and moving in terms of, and Stieg Larsson, I think, understood that perfectly because part of the Millennium novels are procedural novels.
Mm-hmm.
Part of them is obviously from his background of investigative journalism, and then part of them are noir, and part of them are like closed room mysteries. I think in the first one, he even makes a reference to the fact that the murder mystery, because it takes place on an island that was cut off temporarily. He's like, this is a classic locked room mystery. So, because he was very well versed in crime fiction, and he used that as an influence in the Millennium trilogy. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely got that that perspective. We'll say it's also really dark at points.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm more of a fan of the noir type of crime fiction. I sometimes have a hard time with the Agatha Christie type of crime fiction, though I do
Yeah.
like Murder on the Orient Express. I do think is one of the great crime novels
Yeah.
of all time. I mean, you know, quality is still quality.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like the American school, which I study, is such a reaction to the golden age of detective fiction and locked room. I mean, a reaction against, obviously, Hammett and Chandler very much reacted against the private detective, at least in the American school, where he's kind of hard boiled, is much more well, firstly, more of an Americanist and a more kind of urban invention. And I think the reason we're seeing so much kind of golden age stuff right now is that there's a real revival of it, is because people love vintage nostalgia, and people love this depiction of Britain as it was, a very class bound culture with
Mm-hmm.
the upper classes living very, very well, but hiding like dark, dark secrets. And I think that plays very well for television and also cinema. And I think that there's definitely a place for that. I'm not sure. I feel it's kind of rooted in the past. I'm not sure how much future it has in it, because I mean, you don't have to live in England to know that the country's not like that anymore. But it seems to be, commercially, it seems to be doing very well right now.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, you know, the UK and has some great crime writers as well, like Ian Rankin. I haven't read Ian Rankin, unfortunately. I want to at some point, but it's one of
Yeah.
those. He has those freaking detective series are so long. Sometimes it's hard to
Yeah.
know where to start.
Yeah. Well, I actually got to know Ian Rankin really well, because
Yeah, I was about to say
he
he
lays
actually
out.
blurbed your biography, "Love Me Fierce
He,
and Danger," right?
he did indeed. If I know, they can just show it to you. Yeah, Love Me First in Danger, the life of James Ellroy. Yeah, he did blurb it. I'll just give you a blurb of that blurb. It's every bit as gripping and twisted as a James Ellroy novel, and I was quite proud of that. So, I mean, Ian, yeah, Ian is a great guy, and he's very kind of guarded when I spoke to him, but at the same time, very, just appreciative of everything that Ellroy had done, because he was inspired by Ellroy at the 1995 BoucherCon, which took place in Nottingham
Mm-hmm.
here in the UK. He saw Ellroy on stage and was absolutely blown away by everything he said. And that was at a time when Ian Rankin was at a very kind of low ebb in his career wise. Like, he wasn't producing bestsellers, and he'd already had something like 6 novels published, but he wasn't producing bestsellers. And that's a dangerous place to be for a crime novelist, because that's at the stage where the publisher thinks you're never going to write a bestseller, and we're thinking of dropping you. But Ian gave full credit and attribution to Ellroy, that he was so inspired by his kind of fiery passion for crime fiction, that Ian, went out and wrote, you know, um, Black and Blue,
Mm-hmm.
one of his greatest novels, and hit the bestseller list, and has never left the bestseller list. He's an institution now, Sir Ian Rankin.
Yeah, you know, I saw your video about Black and Blue the other day. And I'm like, you know, I might just pick that one up at some point and give it a shot. That might be a good place to start as any.
Yeah, yeah. Start strong, and the depiction of Scotland is fascinating, particularly northeast Scotland, because that one's a lot about the oil industry, and how the oil industry transformed northeast Scotland, North Sea oil, and a lot about the American influence, because It was the Americans who were coming in and investing, billions in the region, and that had its upsides and downsides. It's put very well in the film Local Hero, um, which is
I've not seen
kind of
this.
well, it's very good. I'd recommend it. It's from 1983, and it's kind of a whimsical comedy about a Texas-based oil man who's given the assignment to go to Scotland and exploit the oil possibilities there, and he kind of gets transformed. That sounds a bit cheesy the way I'm putting it, but it's actually very funny, and it doesn't push the sentimentality too far. It's quite dark in places, but yeah, that's a classic film over here, and I like to think in America too.
I'll have to add that. It sounds fun. Or maybe fun's not the right word. I don't know,
Yeah.
but yeah. So you cover a lot of crime stuff on your website as well as your channel, because you have a website as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, the website's called Venetian Vase, and I started it, I think, 15, 16 years ago. It's been a long time now, and I'm kind of proud of that because, a lot of people start websites and it's hard work, and eventually, they give up. But I think the thing I love about Ellroy Research is that there's always one more thing to find out. There's a lot of mysteries in the man's life, so I've kept doing it, and got a pretty dedicated readership out there, which I love, and it's quite an engaging site in terms of I love the engagement with the readers, sometimes the
mhm.
debates, and of course it's just good for a writer to constantly be writing, putting material out there, especially when you're writing full-length books. It takes years, and the publishing process is slow. So to put something out there where you have an instant audience and you can engage with them, weekly or fortnightly is a real blessing for a writer because you don't go soft.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's kind of funny. I was more. I would say I am more of a Dennis Lehane fan. If we're talking more um uh crime writers, you may push back against this because you're Ellroy's biographer, but I do find he's a bit more consistent than Ellroy. I do sometimes think Ellroy kind of goes off on like 12 different tangents.
Yeah.
But I think Ellroy is probably my second favorite, at least who's living right now, because he that very unique style, and that kind of, now I know some of this is a persona, but there's a blunt honesty about both himself and the world he sees that I find quite fascinating. I don't really see in a lot of other people.
Yeah, with Alroy, obviously there's a lot of trauma there,
Mm-hmm.
and that stems back to his childhood. So for anyone who doesn't know, Alroy's mother, Jean Alroy, was murdered when Alroy was 10 years old. She was on a date with, turned out to be the wrong guy. Well, it turns she chose the wrong guy to go on a date on because she was found raped and murdered, and that case is still unsolved. And Alroy went to live with his father. At the age of 10, he was nowhere near mature enough to process that trauma. He reacted to it quite coldly, but subsequently, his father was not a good father. He wasn't paternal. He certainly wasn't strict about his schooling or anything like that. So Alroy fell into delinquent behavior, was expelled from school, drug abuse, and after his father died, homelessness, alcoholism, and he did some jail time in the LA County jail system for various offenses, until he got clean at the age of 27. He nearly died of a lung abscess, and also his lifestyle certainly contributed to that almost premature death. So, he got clean and he really turned his life around. He started writing within a few years and got published quite quickly. But that trauma that I've just described, that never leaves you. And no
Mm-hmm.
matter how much therapy you have or medication you have, and his writing is definitely a way to exercise those demons to an extent, but they will never leave. And I don't even think he fully wants them to leave, because every writer is driven by something or other, or has to have that compulsion to write.
Hmm.
And I think for Ellroy and for many other writers, it's their demons that keep them writing. So he's a complicated guy.
Yeah, that's what I've learned from reading about him and reading his work um I funnily enough, I actually just recently nabbed My Dark Places, which turned into kind of a snafu because I got it off of Amazon and I got the package and it was empty. So I had to contact Amazon and be like, "Hey, Amazon, there's no book in here. We gotta figure this out." And then my dad's like, "All right, here you go. Is this the book you were looking for?" And I'm like, "Yes, thank you." So yeah, I have it now.
Okay, good.
Um, um, yeah, I'm either considering reading that next or American Tabloid next year for 2026. I'm because I've had a long interest in the JFK assassination, so
I
very much
would
looking
go
forward to
with
that.
I would go with American Tabloid first out of those two, because I know a few Ellroy readers who felt like Ellroy had revealed too much in My Dark Places, and that kind of ruined his fiction for them.
Mm,
I mean, I don't feel that way myself, partly because I'm an academic, so whatever Ellroy reveals, whatever I can find out about him, the more the merrier. It's all useful as far as I'm concerned, but some people like to maintain that mystique about writers, especially when reading their fiction. So I would probably say American Tabloid first, and it is an incredible novel, so you won't be disappointed.
yeah, a lot of people. I think a lot of people hail that as his magnum opus. I think even
Mhm.
I don't know if Elroy himself does, but I know a lot of people say that it's his magnum opus.
Well, Ellroy would say the next one. I know he was and a lot of writers are like this. When you say, "Oh, I really admire that book you wrote 35 years ago," they take it as an insult. So, um, I mean, obviously, he knows that that is one of his great works,
Hmm.
and I think it's definitely up there. I think it actually might be his best. He told me he thought LA Confidential, his novel, was a bit overrated, and I actually agreed with him on that.
That's actually
Um,
my favorite, believe it or not. That's the first one I
oh, I
read from him.
see. Right.
Yeah, at least so far. I actually really liked. I actually read The Big Nowhere a few months ago, and I really liked that one as well. So.
Well, yeah, I really like that one, but that's one that aggravates him in terms of when people say that's their favorite, um, because that is not his favorite. So yeah, he kind of,
I'm
but it
actually a
depends
bit.
what.
I'm actually a bit intimidated to read White Jazz because I read part of the Amazon sample. I'm like, what is he talking about?
The way into White Jazz, I mean, every novel has its kind of way in, right? Where if you catch that rhythm, you're going to dig it. And if you don't, you're going to be fighting it. And there's nothing worse than fighting a novel or any work of art where you're like willing it to change in some way. And I
Hmm.
guess we shouldn't do that because they are what they are. But I think with White Jazz, think of the book as a fever
Hmm.
dream of the lead character, um, Dave Klein. And Ellroy, he said he wrote it as such. And obviously, dreams and particularly nightmares have their own kind of logic to them. So maybe it's more in the realms of, say, Cornell Woolrich than some of Ellroy's other work.
Okay. I'll keep that in mind. Um. But yeah, I'm hoping to read American Tabloid next because again, I'm quite fascinated with the JFK assassination.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm curious to see how Elroy does it. I'm sure it's going to be very crazy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, his view on the assassination has changed several times over the years. And maybe I won't go into specifically what he believes now because I don't want to taint your reading in any way. But with American Tabloid, it does lean towards a conspiracy explanation of it. But
Hmm.
I think it's very interesting what a conspiracy is in Alroy's eyes. I mean, he was writing a few. It was published a few years after Oliver Stone's film JFK, which has been huge. Love it all over. It's been a huge, huge
Hmm.
kind of cultural event. And I think Stone's film, for all its merits and all its flaws, kind of changed what conspiracy theories are regarded as being, in terms of the regarded as being these huge events that encompass all governments and hidden governments, whereas in legal terms, a criminal conspiracy might be 3 or 4 people colluding in a robbery. So I don't think I'm giving too much away, and Ellroy writes it as a conspiracy, but you might find it more plausible than some of the more fanciful conspiracies out there.
Yeah, I've read a couple reviews. Like my friend, I have a friend. His name's Kemper. He used to write on Goodreads back in the day. He doesn't anymore, unfortunately. Um, he has beef with JFK for whatever reason. I mean, well, I guess I guess it's more he didn't really like the mythologization of JFK, and he mentioned in his review of American Tabloid, which I think is actually his favorite Ellroy book. But anyway, he said that his favorite part of the book is that Ellroy does not do any of that.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting who is left out of the book. So we don't have Lee Harvey Oswald, we don't have Jim Garrison and his whole investigation with David Ferry and Clay Shaw and all of that, because, well, Ellroy, sometimes telling a story is a race in terms of like who you want to get in, and if somebody's already done that, then maybe that can be more lucky, because if you've got a more plausible story featuring other characters, I mean, history is just multiple perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the researchers focus that Jim Garrison was this very, very flawed character, in some people's eyes, very devious character. So Ellroy steers well clear of that. And again, if you want that story, watch Stone's JFK, or read any of the rebuttals to Stone's film JFK. Ellroy's story is very different.
Fair enough. But I mean, to kind of get off of Ellroy for a minute, what are some crime novels that you personally enjoy that or well, I'll just stick with
can
that
I just have a
question.
look at my shelves? Well, I love the British writer Mo Hayder, who was a wonderful writer who died a few years ago, too young, of motor neurone disease, and she made an incredible debut, her novel Birdman. And then subsequently, she had lived in Japan and worked there as a hostess in the early 90s, just before the kind of economic crash in Japan. It was a good place to work, and she wrote a novel that's heavily based on her experiences, called his original title was Tokyo, and subsequently reissued as The Devil of Nanking. Everything, yeah, it takes in the Nanking atrocities that occurred in the 1930s, perpetrated by the Japanese on the Chinese during the invasion.
Yeah, I think a friend of mine read that recently. He quite enjoyed it. Or, well, I don't know if enjoy. I don't know if enjoy is the right word, but he appreciated it.
Yeah. Well, Mo Hayder is a remarkable writer. Was a great, remarkable writer, and it's sad that she went too soon. So many. I'm just having a quick look at my shelves. Oh gosh, I mean, a lot of the books actually. Well, right now, I'm reading almost exclusively books I cover on Ellroy Reads, the YouTube show, because obviously that's a lot of reading, and at the moment I'm doing an episode a week, so that's like a book a week, and some of them I've read before or want to reread, or some of them it's a first time read for me. So I mean,
have you? I am curious about those. Like, are there any of them that you've read and you just shake your head and you're like, what does Ellroy see in this?
Yeah, one or two. I thought,
because not every book is gonna land, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. John D. MacDonald's The Deceivers, I thought was fairly dull. Um,
I have a friend
yeah.
who loves John D. MacDonald, at least the Travis McGee books.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway.
Oh, I can't fault him there. The Travis McGee books are excellent. This is very different. It's a domestic drama. It's just about two married couples. Um, well, a man and a woman who are married to other people and start having an affair.
Mm-hmm.
And I read it and I thought it was rather dull. I had to put it mildly, but I can see why Ellroy, knowing that his complicated love life over the years, I could see why he would like it. I mean, in terms of, I'm not trying to say that the book is for adulterers only, but it was. I think he's certainly being impulsive when when a woman has been interested. He is a guy who will lay it all on the line for a woman. He even wrote a book about it. His second memoir, The Hilliker Curse, is all about his obsession with women and how it burned down his first two marriages.
I do love me some Elroy, but that's one book I'm kind of like, I don't know if I want to read that. You were saying earlier about he's revealing too much. I'm like, I do think there is such a thing as being too honest about what you get up to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, actually, there's another one where Elroy agrees with you because he told me he'd like to see the book go out of print. He regrets writing it. Yeah, it was. I mean, you've got to think of the clout of the guy, that his publisher didn't really want to publish it. It's not like any of his books. It's not crime related. At least My Dark Places is crime related because it's about an unsolved murder of his mother. This was almost like Confessions of a Sex Maniac. But nevertheless, Ellroy insisted, and they published it. And now he regrets it. So
Elroy's like, ouch, that was not my greatest idea. What was I thinking?
You shouldn't always get what you want as an artist. I think that's important. I think sometimes it's good to have an editor who will push back.
Yeah, that's I've had a couple friends of mine who've complained. I mean, I don't know how much fantasy you read, but Brandon Sanderson recently put out a book, which is the 5th of his series, and a lot of people are like, his editor should have. He's at that point where a lot of people say this about Stephen King as well. They're like, oh Lord, his editor can't say no to him anymore.
Yeah. Well, I mean, publishing, you've got to accept is in an almost permanent state of crisis. I mean, I have hopes for its future because it's part of the human spirit to read. I think we have this compulsion to read and to tell stories.
Mm-hmm.
But the book is always seems to be in crisis, and right now it's AI, and it's also how we're changing as consumers, how we want to scroll through information on our phone, which I can find very addictive and destructive. So these are the challenges publishers are facing. So I think Stephen King always sells. So a publisher would say, yeah, why not?
Well, sure, yeah. I mean, though, to question that, I'd be like, there's a couple times even when King was in his prime, if you even want to call it that, where I'm like, the editors didn't step in. But
Yeah.
I won't belabor that point.
Yeah. King actually used a James Ellroy character in his novel about the Kennedy assassination.
Oh, that's yes. I actually do love 12, 11, 22, 63. I actually think it's one of his best novels. Easily his best modern one, I think, in my opinion. Anyway, I'm sure some people will quit. I'm actually surprised how many people love that one, in a pleasant way.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a great novel. And in fact, King has got much more interest in recent years in crime fiction. He's trying his hand a lot more at crime fiction.
Yes, I've noticed. I've been really bad at keeping up with King because he cranks them out like it's going out of style. Yeah. I know he's been. He actually wrote the foreword of my copy of The Killer Inside Me by Jim Thompson.
I know. Yeah. I suppose he's got the luxury of writing for himself, I mean, I'm sure he's at this age and with his fame and undoubted wealth, he probably thinks, why shouldn't I just write for myself in what time I have left? So I kind of admire that in one sense. I think he's past his prime, but hey, writing any book takes a huge amount of physical and intellectual stamina, and it certainly drained me at times. Although at other times I found it exhilarating. So I can see why authors in their 70s and 80s, it's hard work.
At least he does them himself. James Patterson has like 2 or 3 other people helping him out, and I'm just like, good Lord, man, just yeah. Anyway, I won't rant about James Patterson today.
No, you're fine. Rant away, rant whoever you want.
You did mention P.D. James. I've actually wanted to read her Dalgliesh books because there was the new series that came out. I quite like Bertie Carvel as an actor. He plays Dalgliesh in that. Have you read any of the Dalgliesh books?
Yeah, well, I think we say Dalgliesh, but
Dalgliesh. Sorry.
Yeah, Dalgliesh, but no matter. But yeah, I've read a few of her books. Well, have I read all of the Dalgliesh books? I remember the last one, The Private Patient, very well. I remember some of the famous ones, An Unsuitable Job for a Woman, and she was a brilliant writer, and she was kind of a member of the establishment, and she became a conservative peer in the House of Lords.
Oh, really? I didn't know.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
That's but one of her best friends, Ruth Rendell, became a Labour peer in the House of Lords.
Oh boy.
Yeah, but she used her experience. She'd worked for the Home Office, and she'd worked with like forensic teams and that sort of procedural expertise is in the books. But I think she had a remarkable gift for human nature. There's one brilliant one called Innocent Blood about it was about a change in the adoption laws that happened around the time it was written, which was about 1980 or 82, where adopted children then were given the freedom to look up their biological parents and potentially contact them. And actually, she weaves a brilliant thrill around it, but it's actually her insight into just human character and human experience, which I think really marks her out.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't read any of them. The only one I'm really familiar with is I'm blanking on the title. It was turned into a movie.
Oh, wait, Children of Men?
Yes, that one.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, her only science fiction book, and pretty good one. If you're gonna do one, do Children of Men.
Yeah, I really enjoy the movie. I'm like, I'll check out. I actually have a couple of her books because I went on a huge spree years ago at my local library. They were selling off some old books they didn't need anymore, and I got a bunch of stuff. One of her books was one of them. I don't want to pull it out at the moment because of the pile in this drawer. I don't want to scrounge through it. I got like I think Lincoln, one of Gore Vidal's books.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Couple other ones. I got some John D. MacDonald books and a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Well, Gore Vidal I find fascinating because, well, funnily enough, of the British authors we've mentioned, they all kind of became establishment figures. I mean, Ian would hate me for saying that, but they became either peers or knights of the realm, and Gore Vidal, in a sense, was that kind of American establishment figure in terms of he was the grand old man of American letters, and he was, the son of a senator, and but at the same time, actually, I'm not sure if his father was a senator. He had a senator in his family. At the same time, he could step outside politics to comment on it so acerbically. I always found him fascinating.
Yeah, I saw you covered Burr, his book about Aaron Burr, the man who would go on to kill Alexander Hamilton. Though unfortunately, that's kind of overshadowed any of the other things he's done.
Yeah,
or he did, I should say. He's long past now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Though apparently
Yeah.
trouble
I mean,
followed him everywhere, if the history record is to be believed, because I guess Hamilton's death just cursed him, or he was just a
yeah. And
scumbag. Who knows?
well, maybe, but Hamilton seems to be going through this big renaissance because of the musical.
Yeah, it's that. Yeah, it's true. I watch a lot of history YouTube, and there's one guy I watch who called him the most overrated and underrated founding father, which I don't know how
That's
that's
good.
possible,
Yeah.
but it's yeah.
Well, I actually went to Hamilton's house, my wife and I, when in New York. It's in Harlem. It's remarkably, interestingly preserved 18th century house with skyscrapers all around it. But yeah, he has become this somewhat. Yeah, he's become quite iconic to a lot of conservative figures on both sides of the pond.
Yeah, it's Hamilton became quite big. I haven't actually listened to the whole thing. I know of it from popular hearsay.
Hmm.
Um, but I found it. I think it's a good thing though, because it gets people interested in history.
Yeah,
And once you actually read about like Hamilton and his personality and just some of the uh, fights he got into, for lack of a better word, it's
mhm.
quite fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously, the founding fathers, yes, it was a young country. There were many different ideas, different philosophies on what that country should be like, and Hamilton was quite strident in his views. But I think why he's going through a renaissance with conservatives is, some of his ideas about the money supply and banking and um, in conservative circles, that's making something of a renaissance.
Yeah, from what I've noticed from my research in the founding fathers, it's kind of like Jefferson gave America its ideals, but Hamilton
Mhm.
is the guy who made America what it is. Kind of built
Yeah,
America into what it is, for better or
yeah,
for worse.
yeah, absolutely.
The whole
I mean,
Jeffersonian versus Hamilton side of the aisle is still being debated to this day out here in America. It's just shifted over time.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, the current situation, with Trump in the White House again.
Oh, I think
I
that's
mean, I
gone
don't, I
way
don't want to make any
beyond.
partisan points, yeah, because I don't want hate mail, and I don't want to go too political on your show or anything. But I will say this: it's covered daily, here in Britain and pretty much wherever you go in the world. It's. I think America is still number one. It's still the most fascinating country on earth. It still gets the most news coverage.
That
For
must
what's
be
going on, you've
annoying.
got to
Those frickin' Americans, they don't know what they're doing. You're as a British person. I'm curious.
Well,
I'm
I
I'm
mean,
I'm I'm surprised you don't feel just like shaking your heads like those frickin' Americans. They don't know what they're doing.
well, no, not at all. I mean, I'm an Americanist as a scholar, and
I,
also,
I mean, you cover a lot of hard-boiled American crime fiction, so you know what? That makes sense.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think the grass is always greener, in terms of what fascinates you, what has a kind of romantic mystique. I know a lot of Americans feel the same way about Britain, but like I'm married an American, so like I've got a lot of family over there, so um, or everywhere you are, I should say. But my wife's from Detroit. Her whole family's still either in Detroit or in Michigan, so I do hear a lot about what's going on and what they think of it.
Fair enough. Yeah, and yeah, it's yeah, we're in a weird spot right now. I always, you know what? I've noticed with kind of going back to Elroy a little bit. I find that from what I've read of Elroy, which are the three um L.A. Quartet books, is that I find one of the things that Elroy gets right more than anything in a lot of his books is that kind of cognitive dissonance of America.
Hmm.
The prince this and I mean Elroy doesn't give easy answers for sure about it. He just goes, "This is just how it is." This is
Yeah.
how history you know has gone on. That we're built as this nation with high ideals, but we've broken a lot of them just by human nature. exploiting
Yeah,
people and taking their stuff.
yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, I know Ellroy loathes any kind of utopian philosophy.
Mm.
He's just adamant that they won't work. Yeah,
Oh, is
because
that is that right? I would never have suspected.
well, we are fallen, we are sinful in his eyes. I mean, he's quite Christian in that respect, so he knows that any
Well, he said America was never
political,
innocent, so I mean, that
yeah,
makes sense.
yeah, yeah. But I think he thinks that democracy is the least worst option.
Hmm.
Um, you'll still have corruption, but you'll have a certain degree of accountability with the corruption. Essentially, the people will go to prison before the greed spirals out of control. And I think that's probably the best you can hope for. Yeah, there will always be graft, there will always be corruption, but there's more accountability. I think he feels that definitely post Watergate. Um, that was something of a turning point in American history. I don't think he doesn't want to write any novels set after Watergate now, any historical novels, because he thinks there was a greater degree of accountability that swept in. Not to the extent where we're anywhere close to, even an idealized society, never mind a utopian one. But for his crime novels to work, for historical crime fiction to work, you've got to have a system where there is almost free reign for people to commit abuses. That's why in government and outside government, that's why he writes about things like COINTELPRO, and where that was just an abuse of government power.
Yeah, yeah, but I find he gets that right about America because we it's kind of like the anti-people's history of the United States, which is funny because I don't know if you're familiar with Grant Nebel of
Oh yeah,
the Salute fame, but he's written a lot about James Ellroy,
yeah,
and
yeah. I spoke
also
to him
the
once.
Shield, which I think is actually the best criticism of the Shield that I've ever read.
Right. Okay. Well, there's a web of connections here because Ellroy wrote a TV pilot that was actually never produced
Mm.
for the guy. Is it Sean Ryan?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
did
Sean
hear
Ryan.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. It was about the Hillside Strangler Task Force, and so that's a kind of connection to the Shield. And yeah, Grant. I interviewed Grant about when I was writing the biography, Let Me Face in Danger, about knowing Ellroy. And I mean, it's quite a nice story because I think you just got to know him through various readings that he would go along to. And Ellroy can be very forthcoming. A few people have got to know him that way.
Yeah.
In fact, the way I did, a little bit, although the relationship kind of spiraled into something much bigger. And when you came to biographer, where it's like quite intense,
Yeah, I
but yeah,
saw like a compilation of him just saying wild shit at readings
yeah,
from like what was it, like 2011, I think, or something. I don't know. I don't remember.
yeah.
But it's on YouTube.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Well, yeah, he can always be a bit wild at his book readings. Now knowing him in the way I do, I'm aware that he's had certain relapses at certain points in his life. So if I see a book reading on YouTube or something that seems outrageous, or he seems kind of out of character, or like where like the performance has slipped a little bit, I can often check the date and say, yeah, I see that was during a relapse. I mean, he had a nervous breakdown during the tour for the Colt 6000. That was a big international tour, and it was just too much for him eventually. All that travel, all that strain, and the stress got to him.
Yeah, but but kind of going back to the point I was making, if I could quote, paraphrasing here, but he mentioned that he's like, Zen wrote with such, depth and care about his subject, and with Ellroy, like after reading Ellroy, his reaction is just, well, Howard, how the hell did you think it happened? Which is a very non-romantic way of looking at it.
Yeah.
But I mean, it feels true. Like the other day, I was actually at an event because minoring in creative writing for at my college, and there's this event where people were reading poetry and just
Mhm.
it was a very arty thing. And there was this kind of short monologue about because I live in Oklahoma, so a lot of native. Oklahoma is actually a native word, but
Mhm.
yeah, there was a big monologue about it, and I was polite, but I just kind of had to shake my head at it because it felt kind of hollow, and also just I don't know what it had to do with what we were doing, but it's what are you gonna do?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean,
I don't know what
I
you
know
think of
Elroy.
this, but I know I from what I've known of Elroy, I imagine he probably wouldn't have much patience with that stuff either.
No, no. Well, I know he doesn't like wokery, and he didn't like political correctness when that was the big buzzword.
Mm.
I mean, looking back 30 years on, he might think a bit more favorably of political correctness now that perhaps for its downsides, maybe it did make us a bit more civil towards each other, a bit more at ease with each other. But uh, I also know there was one literary event where he was so triggered by uh, one female comedian's monologue and the subjects she was touching on that he ordered her off the stage.
Oh
It
no.
was, yeah, it was quite shocking, and the reaction he got from the audience himself was very, very divisive. Some people were like, "Yeah, I'm glad you did that because she was being really offensive," and others were like, "You pig! I mean, how could you do that? You didn't give her the time to finish a monologue and everything else." It's tricky. I don't think he should have done it personally, but I happen to know because it's a mental health issue. If he was triggered, then he's triggered, and you go into flight or fight syndrome. And yeah, well, what can I say?
Yeah, I mean, I won't I won't argue with that. I don't know the man. I've just read a few of his books. You do though, so it's you have a so there's a I guess I should get into your own book, Love Me Fierce and Dangerous. Sadly, I haven't read it yet, but I'm hoping in 2026 I can sneak it in because I did read the Amazon sample and I quite liked what I was reading.
Good.
Um um uh I know you have talked about how you got to write the book, but I'll just ask you here again if you don't mind answering.
Well,
But like how was it? Because from what I've seen of Elroy, like I said, I do admire his candor in describing the world he sees and himself, but I imagine
mhm.
that doesn't make him the easiest person to be around.
Yeah, well, firstly, the book was great to do, but to backtrack on how I'd done it is that I had written and edited books on Elroy before, but that they were strictly academic texts. And I was getting to the stage where I was getting frustrated with maybe the lack of impact that an academic book has. So I said, I want to write the big one. And I think the big one has to be Elroy's biography. And yeah, I'd known him previously. There was a time when we'd spent a lot of time talking on the phone, and I'd been to visit him in LA, but I hadn't seen him for a couple of years. But anyway, I put together the proposal, and I actually got the contract with Bloomsbury without getting any blessing from Elroy.
Oh
So
no.
I was kind of like, "Oh crumbs! What? I've got this contract, but if he refuses to cooperate, that's really going to land me in it." And he actually made some comments prior that he was almost looking for a biographer, so it was almost a race against time because I thought,
Mm.
for all I know, someone else could have read those comments and be like, "Hey, I'll write it." But anyway, so I contacted him again once I landed the contract, and he was delighted. He was over the moon, and we pretty much started right where we'd left off. Where it came to be is we agreed that interviews would be crucial.
Mm.
and he wanted me to interview all of his ex-partners, and let's say there were a lot. Friends, including former friends. Some of his friends had gone through difficult breakups that were almost as difficult as the romantic breakups.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, publishing colleagues, so fellow novelists. He seemed like he'd been friends at least once with every prominent novelist of his generation. Sometimes it was a friendship more rooted in rivalry than amity, but that was a great experience interviewing all those people and then checking in with him frequently and saying, "This is who I've interviewed." And if it was a friend, he'd be delighted. And if it was someone who he'd had a more difficult relationship with, he'd be not so delighted, put it that way. But he was always very, what's the word? Well, kind of, yeah, disciplined or Spartan or, stoic, I think is the word, in terms of, I realize you have to have these conversations if it's with someone who feels betrayed by me, but they witnessed that episode of my life in that particular year. I understand you've got to do what you've got to do to get down the narrative of my life. So he was very cool about that, if you get my meaning. So although there were many difficult conversations, either with Ellroy or with someone else, that kept me going, that I had this license to go out there and to find the truth.
Yeah, I saw your video about the book that one of his ex-partners wrote, The Big Hurt. I think it's
Big Hurt, yeah.
Is it Erica Schickel?
Yeah, Erica Schickel wrote The Big Hurt, yeah.
I always think it sounds like a piece of money that you get in like a fantasy book. But yeah, no, I've read some reviews of that, and I saw your video, and I'm like, that sounds interesting. I'll have to add that. And from what I read of it, God, her parents sounded awful. I mean, I probably shouldn't judge because I haven't read the actual book yet, but good
well,
Lord,
I mean,
man.
her father, Richard Schickel, was a very prominent film critic. He was up there with Roger Ebert in terms of, at one point in his career, in terms of his popularity. This is when critics had clout. I don't think they do anymore. But I would say more than anyone else, I was really worried about what Erica would say about him, both in the book and in my conversation with her. And I had a great conversation actually with Erica. She's very candid, but she's a very passionate, fiery woman. Every inch, the kind of fiery redhead, I guess. And I will say this: she really loved Ellroy, and this is kind of the irony of it, because obviously some of the relationships he'd been in, I don't think either party were that emotionally invested. Either they weren't in Ellroy or he wasn't in them. They seemed like they were just coasting. With Erica, she really, really loved him. I mean, she gave up her marriage for him, and that's no small thing. But at the same time, by writing that book, The Big Hurt, Ellroy certainly took it as an insult, and he considered it that it was revenge on her part. So the bigger the love, the bigger the sense of betrayal, and the bigger the sense of revenge, I guess. That's one of the big ironies of it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I won't comment on that because I haven't read the book yet, but I would like to though. You've turned me on to some interesting books that I've not read, but I hope to. I'm actually hoping in 2026 to read a bunch of crime books because I'm like, well, I haven't been keeping up with it, and I'm kind of burned out on some of the books I'm reading right now, so I'm just going to catch up on some other genres I really like. So I have, I'm hoping to get to the Maltese Falcon at some point, and
that's a good one.
I know you mentioned, I think you made a video about this. It's the Chester Himes book. I think it's A Rage in Harlem.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Gosh, there were a few great Chester Himes, the real cool killers. Yeah, I mean, Chester Himes is a fascinating writer, and
sad story. I've read his biography. Sad story he had.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that goes into the whole history of race in America and what you were talking about earlier about the cognitive dissonance. Now, of course, he's seen as a visionary author, but in his lifetime, it was much more difficult for him. But acclaimed and revered in France, as seems to be many of the best American writers.
Yeah, no, crime is a big thing over there in France. I mean, that's where
Yeah.
noir comes from. It just means black.
Yeah, and they love Ellroy over there. I mean, he's actually probably
I kind
the
of viewed him
biggest.
more as an Anglophile because he calls himself a Tory. I've recalled from like read because I've read
Yeah.
articles on your website and stuff, and
Mhm.
like you said earlier, it's kind of hard not to get obsessed with Elroy in a weird way. I don't know. I don't know how that
Yeah, well, I mean,
can't have this
Ellroy
hyperactive
is
79 year
large. He
old menace
contains
running around.
multitudes. He's Ellroy, is huge in Britain and huge in France. I think Britain's history he feels is much more tied up in America's history, and that in terms of the Glorious Revolution is kind of similar to the American Revolution in this kind of Tory worldview. I think maybe he feels like French history is a bit more tied to the idea of arbitrary government, and I think that offends his kind of Tory sensibilities. But I know he absolutely loves France. He's a real Francophile, and his wife speaks French.
Oh,
He's back with Helen Canode, although they divorced many years ago. They eventually reconciled, and
yeah,
they
I
are a
think I've
couple
heard
again.
that somewhere.
Yeah.
I want to read her book as well. The one about the movie critic. I'm forgetting the name of it at the moment.
The Ticket Out.
The Ticket
Yeah,
Out. Thank you.
that
Yes.
that was that. I feel that was a really good debut, and I feel because Ellroy was kind of going through a nervous breakdown at the time that she didn't get the kind of momentum behind her career that she deserves because she spent a lot of time looking after him. But yeah, the Ticket Out is a great debut, and I end up spending a lot of time with Helen in terms of the conversations we have. I really treasure. But let me tell you, at the beginning, Helen wasn't keen on the idea of an Ellroy biography at all.
Oh.
Yeah, and it took some. I think Ellroy was very persuasive in bringing her around to it, and we had some conversations. Um,
Yeah, in the
I,
Amazon
'cause
sample, you called Helen Node the one person who's closest to understanding him.
yeah, yeah, that's fair. And the one person I think in terms of his partners who could stand up to him, I mean, that's crucial, and I think what has made that relationship work, in spite of the numerous hiccups along the way, is that she can really stand up to him. She told him, "Don't write the Hilliker Curse. That will be nothing but harmful to you." She was right. But yeah, she is a formidable woman, and I mean, I adored my conversations with her because like Ellroy, she could totally let loose on some Hollywood figure or some sacred cow. She could absolutely tear to shreds. Um, that's what I loved about the candor of it, and the kind of humor and that kind of aggression. I feel that's why
Yeah,
Ellroy,
I've seen
he
them
calls himself a
interact,
demon dog.
and I've seen them interact in the what is it? The Feast of Death, I think is that
Yeah,
the documentary. I've
he's,
seen them interact in that. I'm like, oh well, okay. I think he's got a real
yeah,
keeper there.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, interestingly, they're polar opposites because Helen is on the left. She is a cultural Marxist, as she puts it,
Oh
not an
no.
economic Marxist. No, yeah. Well, there's a lot of Marxism at university. It's usually not the kind of economic side of things. Definitely the kind of more the cultural side. But yeah, so she's pretty much on the far left. He's, conservative. Some people have said far right. He's definitely conservative. I don't think he's far right at all. But yeah, they really clash and they go at it all the time in terms of if she's an atheist, he's a Christian, she's Marxist, he's conservative. I mean, you can imagine how
Yeah, I
they
guess
go at it, and I've
opposites really
seen
do attract. Yeah, all right.
it. Yeah, yeah, certainly in that case. But I suppose in a way, Alroy might say there's elements of her Marxism or her leftism that he really admires and actually agrees with. I suppose
Hmm.
that the whole left-right thing is actually a loop, and you think there is more crossover than we would expect, and maybe the culture wars have made us forget this. And Alroy I guess, loves a good argument or loves a good debate, as he might put it, in terms of like, well, we can disagree. We don't always have to be falling out. Most of his friends were on the left. I suppose growing up in Los Angeles, he always had that sense of otherness, even though his parents were very conservative, and I'm sure he got a lot of it from them.
Mm-hmm.
So he likes to be provocative when he's in LA.
Do you think some of it is just him being a contrarian?
Yeah, absolutely. Because if he was somewhere else, if he tours the country, and if he was in Texas or somewhere, or Oklahoma even, or I'm sure he'd be liberal left as provocative as he could. He would gauge the audience, and he would maybe try to provoke them, but not in a way that was contemptuous, not in a way that was mean spirited.
Well,
I
yeah.
usually think when he's at his best, you're in on the gag.
Mm-hmm.
And he wouldn't want to offend any people group just for the sake of it. He'd more just he'd see them almost like a court jester. He is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I do wonder if he'd have made good as a stand-up comedian.
Yeah.
Because some of his stuff I'm like, good lord. But what was I gonna say? I was gonna say it's almost like he was destined to write
Mhm.
crime fiction, because kind of like what Ian Rankin said, like his life almost seems straight out of a crime book.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he discovered crime fiction shortly after his mother's murder.
Mm-hmm.
And I think obviously tying the two together in his mind, and what literature does is, in some ways, although it doesn't provide all of the answers, I mean, we made that point earlier in terms of Ellroy doesn't think all of the answers can be provided, because obviously the system that we live in is deeply flawed and human beings are deeply flawed, but it does provide some resolution. I mean, when he set out to write The Black Dahlia, he did say about the unsolved murder of Elizabeth Shaw, I solved the murder in the book because I'm not going to cheat the reader that way. He does think that some answers should be provided.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's yeah, yeah. I mean, I read The Black Dahlia for the first time last year, and thought it was. I liked it, but I thought there were parts of it that right. I felt he got better as he went along.
Mm-hmm. It
Though it
was a break.
probably didn't help reading L.A. Confidential first.
I see. Well, the Black Dahlia was a breakout novel for him. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that was what we were talking about Ian Rankin before, almost being dropped. If Ellroy hadn't wrote the Black Dahlia, he probably would have been dropped. He'd
Mm-hmm.
written 6 novels, and none of them prior to that had reached the bestseller lists.
Mm-hmm.
And the Black Dahlia did, and it got him the attention of critics, and he hasn't stopped ever since. But he'd been obsessed with the case
Mm-hmm.
ever since he found out about it in a book called The Badge by Jack Webb, the producer and star of Dragnet. That was a gift for him on his 11th birthday, his first birthday after his mother's murder. And there's a summation, about a 10-page summation of the Black Dahlia case in it, the murder of Elizabeth Shaw, and he became absolutely obsessed with it. Here's this young woman who was murdered in a fashion much more brutally than his mother, but and it was unsolved. But yeah, of course, he tied the two together in his mind. He became obsessed with that case. So in many ways, it's kind of poetic that became his bestseller and his breakout novel.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he might say it was almost divinely providential in some way, because he's quite a religious man. So I think he always knew that was going to be his breakout novel.
It's interesting. Yeah, I read it. I'm like, oh yeah, I mean, I liked it. I thought it was a good book.
Mm-hmm.
Though it did feel like more of a traditional, noir book than what he
Yeah.
would eventually go on to do, which I guess makes sense because that was like his first like big book, like you said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, he wasn't gonna write one bestseller and start polishing his laurels. He wanted to challenge himself and to break out, and he's really been pushing himself ever since, always to do something different. I mean, at the time, although obviously so much has been written about the Kennedys since, but at the time, American Tabloid, that was obviously a huge, epic novel. That was a real challenge for him to write. And the fact that he'd done The Black Dale about 8 years previously, which was much more kind of traditional detective novel in some respects, shows you just how far he was progressing and advancing in terms of just his literary style and his maturity as a writer, because his ambition never left him.
Yeah, I think I read in an interview once. He said he wanted to have a good final act.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not sure whether your viewers or your readers are aware that his next novel, Red Sheet, the title has just been announced, and it'll be released either June or July of next year. And this is one of several novels he's written recently that features Fred Otash, real life character who's known as the Private Eye to the Stars. And Ellroy knew Otash in his later years. They kind of had something of a friendship, although Ellroy claims he never liked him because Otash was quite a disreputable character in many ways. But a lot of us Ellroy readers are excited about this new novel, and we're looking forward to it, and we just can't wait to see what Ellroy does next.
Yeah, it's always a good thing, when he puts out new stuff. Because I mean, I'll have to pick it up at some point. I'm kind of playing catch up at the moment. I haven't read American Tabloid yet, and I'm like, I'll put that up there at some point.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I really liked. Though I am curious how he'll explain Oswald if he's not in the book. But you don't have to spoil it.
No, okay, yeah, maybe I won't say anymore. But it is kind of remarkable how he does that. You'll be fully involved in the story. I think it took him a long time to figure out the best way to do historical fiction, and in that the best way is not to be in say JFK's head all the time. The best way is to create characters who see JFK or Bobby Kennedy or anybody else, from a distance or a kind of sideways view, and then that's how you create realism.
Yeah, yeah, it's don't stick to the facts so much. I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about. But I'm looking forward to it. I'm hoping I enjoy it. I'm sure I will. I've enjoyed most of Ellroy's stuff that I've read. So
Yeah, you'll have a blast reading it.
yeah, there's though there are the few of them where he's just going like full demon dog, like White Jazz, and I'm like, I don't know if I can handle this.
Yeah.
Or like the Hilliker Curse. I'm like, I don't know if I could put up with it, but
Well, I think, yeah, if American Tabloid is your next one, and then after that, the direct sequels, which are the Colt 6000 and Bloods a Rover, and because they're covering, each one covers 5 years of American history. So all three of those novels put together cover 1958 to 72. So whether the style is not so much the issue, the narrative is just extremely strong and really fascinating, the period.
Yeah, I mean, this actually brings me to another kind of question. As his biographer, I'm curious what you make of this, but it's often said about James Ellroy's work, and even Ellroy has said himself that his work is very moral, even though it's often about disreputable characters. And I've always been curious what that means. Grant Nebel had a good explanation for it, but I'm curious what like your explanation, like what would you describe the morality of Ellroy's work as being?
Well, I think he's a kind of very moral guy, and the morality of his work is that ultimately you will get punished for evil deeds. I mean, his characters, he's very adamant about this. They belong to the system. It's a corrupt system, so they are corrupt people. And they benefit, from the system for their own needs. They keep the system going, but in the end, they pay a very, very high price for it. And it's almost Faustian in a way, because he knows that obviously men especially get very turned on by power,
Mm-hmm.
by wealth, by the sex, all of the temptations, and he's quite honest about that. And of course, he has been, not so much power, but he has lived a life which has had moments of wealth and there's a temptation with women and everything. But he's quite adamant that there's a very high price for that. And he's never written any book where, by the coda, people haven't paid the price.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. I saw that particularly develop as reading the Big Nowhere, especially in L.A. Confidential as well.
Mm-hmm.
Though again, I know he's. I was actually introduced to Ellroy's world, if you want to call it that, through the movie adaptation of L.A. Confidential, which I know he's kind of zigzagged on over the years.
Oh, yeah.
Like I know he was very enthusiastic about it when it came out, and now he's just kind of like, it's bullshit.
Yeah, yeah.
Which
I
mean,
think that's.
which I don't know how much of that is just him bullshitting, but
Oh, actually, I think that's one thing he's really adamant on. I know I saw him get apoplectic, fits of anger at the thought of it, and I feel, because he knows movies have a bigger imprint on like public consciousness, that he really doesn't like the fact that that movie has become synonymous with his name. He wants his books to be synonymous with his name. And he generally is very, very down on people interpreting his work. He's quite down on Hollywood in general quite now. Although he worked hard to try and get a sequel made, LA Confidential 2.
really,
The studios weren't interested.
yeah, it was one thing I was kind of sad because White Jazz is a book, but then again, I guess that would be an even harder film to make than
Yeah.
LA Confidential probably was. But
Well, there were attempts. There were attempts to get White Jazz made. There was a script by Matthew Carnahan, and it was going to be Robert Richardson, the famous cinematographer, who's going to be his directorial debut. Anyway, it just went through development hell for years, and now it seems like there's no movement on that one. But yeah, LA Confidential 2, the film, was going to be a kind of sequel in its own world. It wasn't going to be from an Ellroy novel.
okay.
And Ellroy was going to be involved in it. It was going to be him and Brian Helgeland mostly, because, well, first, when Curtis Hanson was alive, he was kind of down on the project, and that was the start of Ellroy and Curtis Hanson kind of falling out. Then Curtis Hanson died, and I think there was another attempt to, get it made. But Brian Helgeland, who I had the good fortune to speak to, and is a wonderful guy, he said, we got to the point where we thought, whatever filmmaking is in 2018, which is when they made these pictures, filmmaking doesn't want LA Confidential 2 right now. It's moved on. He's a very pragmatic guy, and I think Ellroy began to see it that way as well.
Yeah, it's it's interesting because I remember I do actually prefer the book over the movie, even though I really enjoy the film still, and I actually think it's Ellroy might assassinate me for saying it, but I think it's a good introduction to to his world, if you will. And I gotta say it, I find Guy Pearce and Russell Crowe just so skillfully inhabited the characters of Ed Exley and Bud. I can't see them, or I when I read L.A. Confidential, I can't imagine them as anybody else.
Yeah, I think it's a great film as well. I disagree with Ellroy and his hatred for it. I think it's the one really good adaptation. There have been 2 TV pilots of LA Confidential since.
Mm-hmm.
The first one I felt was kind of disastrous. I only recall Kiefer Sutherland played Jack Vincennes in it. I can't remember anything else about it. It was disaster. The second one was really interesting, and that was the showrunner on that was Jordan Harper, who is a very nice guy. And is a very acclaimed novelist in his own right now, but
You
he
know, it's funny.
worshipped Ellroy.
It's funny you mention him. I'm actually reading his book. She Writes Shotgun right now. So
Oh yeah,
yeah,
that's a good
I was
one.
actually gonna start with Everybody Knows in 2026, but then She Writes Shotgun was being made into a movie, and I'm like, well, okay, She Writes Shotgun isn't very long. Screw it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Everybody Knows is great too. I mean, Jordan's a great writer, and he named his dog Ellroy in honor
You know,
of.
I was kind of saying he kind of reminds me a little bit of just reading it because there's that kind of I like to call it grab him by the throat and throttle him kind of prose style
Yeah,
that Elroy is good at when he's at his best. Though it's more lucid.
yeah.
I'd say because again, I think Elroy likes to go on like different tangents. Again, you might
Oh,
quibble
indeed.
because you're his
Yeah,
biographer,
yeah. Well, I mean,
or at
if I
least
can just,
you might be more forgiving towards it. Maybe because you're his biographer. I don't know.
well,
I
I
don't want to
mean, in
make
terms of
assumptions.
Ellroy, I mean, in person, I mean, I had to gauge what sort of mood he was in, daily, and in terms of like listening to him when he went on a tangent, that was kind of good for me because I would often find if it was a kind of stream of consciousness monologue, there would be a great story in there, a great nugget, a great revelation. I just want to go back to Jordan Harper. When you get to Everybody Knows, one of the things about Jordan is he's one of the most candid people about Hollywood now, because most people who
Yeah,
work in Hollywood
I've
have
heard
been burnt.
I've heard Everybody Knows be compared to like Elroy, and I'm like, yeah, right, okay, buddy, I'll see about that. But I do like She Writes Shotgun so far. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah.
He's
Well,
but
I would
sorry,
compare
continue your
Everybody
point.
Knows to say Day of the Locust or What Makes Sammy Run in terms of just a classic Hollywood novel, a classic Hollywood expose, or in yeah. So like Jordan's got that in terms of he's very very candid, and a lot of people aren't because they're worried about not being able to get work again. But Jordan's done it, so I'd say hats off to him.
He's burning it all down.
Yeah. Well, maybe. I mean, Elroy thinks Hollywood is over. Now, that's a big comment, and you can read it in many different ways. But obviously, the system is changing with AI and all manner of things. Most people think it's not going to be great for writers in the future, particularly in Hollywood. So I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I have heard of this mythical L.A. Confidential uh pilot apparently that he did. Because I've seen interviews with him and he talked about it. And he's like, oh yeah, we had Walton Goggins as Jack Vincennes. I'm like, that's an interesting casting choice. So, okay.
Yeah,
Um, I didn't really see him as Jack Vincennes, but then again, he did play Shane Vendrell in The Shield, who's also a wildly self-destructive character. So, you know what? I guess that makes sense, actually.
well, I was lucky enough to see it because Jordan sent me a personal copy. You're going to remember during the biography, it was a time where I just got to speak to so many people because Elroy opened doors for me. And yeah, Jordan sent me a copy, and I thought it was great. It never aired, but it has been shown at film festivals and stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
it got a lot of good publicity. And I think it's got Jordan a lot of work in terms of he was a showrunner, so he made a heck of a lot of decisions on it. The only thing I didn't like about it was I felt like the cinematography was too dark. I felt like that whole noir thing seemed to be certain scenes I could barely see what was going on. But I feel that way about a lot of movies. Maybe it's an age thing where I'm watching a horror movie or something, and I'm like, why don't somebody turn the light on? I can't see anything.
I was like I went on Blue Sky one day and just kind of winged it on a prayer. I was like who's gonna play Ed Exley and Bud White? And he's like, oh, here's the IMDb page. I'm like, oh, thanks. He's very kind enough to provide the IMDb
Yeah,
page. So yeah, very nice of him.
yeah, yeah. Good guy.
Yeah, no, I am curious though because I really like Dennis Lehane. Have you read any of Dennis Lehane's stuff?
Yeah, I seem to have read all the ones that have been turned into movies. So Mystic River, Shutter Island. I'm trying to think if I've read any others. I started reading one. Was it called The Given Day or something like that? And I
Mm.
ended up giving up on it because I felt it got too epic.
Ah,
So, but I mean, he's a great writer, and I think obviously he's portrayed Boston through contemporary fiction and through historical fiction in a way that is just really, really riveting.
mm.
Um, but which ones would you really recommend?
I mean, I really, I'd say Mystic River is probably his best novel that I've
Mhm.
read.
Yeah.
But I really like the, I really like the Kinsey and Gennaro books.
Mhm.
Because well, there's 6 books instead of like 18 that you might find from like a Robert B. Parker or even Travis McGee for that matter,
Yeah.
or Easy Rollins. Um,
Yeah.
I like I've read Devil in a Blue Dress. I quite like that. Have you read that one? That's another L.A. noir book.
No, I haven't read Devil in a Blue Dress. I've seen the film, which
Mm.
I know is a really boring answer, but I did enjoy the film, and I really should read the book.
I mean they're pretty close, so
Mhm.
except for the ending. I actually think the ending of the film is a little better than the books. I find Mosley has a problem of being like trying to be too complicated with the endings.
Yeah, well, I felt the film was crying out for a sequel. I thought he needed to come back and kill the Don Cheadle character. Like, he was going crazy, and I thought, and I couldn't believe there wasn't a sequel. I was just like, that seemed like a confrontation that had entirely been set up. And but yeah, I'll have to read the books now to see how that plays out in the books.
Yeah, and I read another one of his books called Down the River Under the Sea, which I thought was just like convoluted. I'm like, this is dumb. I'm not reading
A
this.
convoluted title, so
And I'm like, you think it'd be hard to write a mystery novel, but yeah, I don't know. I like Devil in a Blue Dress more. I'll just say that.
Hmm.
Um, though again, it's like, dude, you don't have to be so complicated. Just give a simple answer to what's going on here.
Yeah,
It could be,
yeah. Well, I mean, the crime novel, it's going through this renaissance right now, and as you say, certain critics are beginning to take it seriously, and it's being taught in universities as
yeah,
well.
it's
And
yeah, it's interesting that crime fiction has kind of a weird, you know, or at least I think it is from what I've noticed anyway. It has kind of a weird relationship with like capital L literature. Like there are guys like Ellroy are being taken more seriously because at his best he tends to kind of what this is gonna sound so pretentious, transcend crime fiction at times.
no, no, that's good. Yeah, I mean, he
I'm
yeah, but
sure
in
Elroy would
terms of
appreciate it because I know
yeah. He wants to be known as a literary figure, not just a crime writer. If that doesn't sound pretentious or pompous, but yeah, he definitely wants to be known as a literary figure, and that's what spurs him on to constant experimentation. On page, because he's always trying to outdo himself. I think, and I think a lot of writers today, there's a lot of Elroy imitators out there, and some of them have done it in a way where they've developed their own voice, and some of the others have come across mostly as pastiche. I actually became quite good friends with David Peace. Well, in terms of correspondence, he lives in Japan, so but he's one of the great British crime writers, but
hmm
also writer of historical fiction. And I think he developed Elroy's ideas in a way that really developed his own voice. He could take Elroy ideas and write about them in a story about the Yorkshire Ripper, or even post-war Japan. I think it's ingenious what he's done.
Yeah, he's created a place for himself in the noir canon, if you will, which I'm sure
Hmm.
he's very pleased about because, as you've shown in your on your show on YouTube, he is quite the noir aficionado.
Hmm. Yeah, and a very down to earth and very helpful guy. And yeah, yeah, just good company, good, very very knowledgeable, good conversationalist.
Yeah, and also probably the when everyone thinks of like post-war Los Angeles, like everyone thinks of him now because he basically defined it in L.A. Quartet.
Yeah, we're talking about Elroy again now. Yeah, well, yeah, yeah. I mean, well,
For better or for worse, I should say. I don't know
yeah,
what he thinks about it
yeah,
now,
absolutely. Well,
but
Elroy would love that in terms of, yeah, Elroy. I mean, you like that Joan Didion quote about, a writer is, oh, I'm very paraphrasing now, very hackneyed paraphrase here, but um, a writer is the person who obsesses over a place and owns it mostly through obsession. I've got that quote completely wrong, but that to Joan Didion was talking about From Here to Eternity and
mm,
the James Jones novel about the Schofield Barracks in Hawaii, turned into a famous film, which Alroy loves, the book, not the film. But Alroy has very much taken that philosophy about a writer needs to own a place so entirely that they create it themselves, and
mm-hmm.
that is owned almost exclusively by them culturally or through writing. He feels very strongly that that's his mission to do that about Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I know that. I mean, I'd say he's done it. I don't know if I'm sure a bunch of people agree, but I yeah, no, definitely. He's kind of I mean, he's kind of up there with like Stephen King with Maine, if you will. I don't know if he'd
Yeah.
like that, but it's.
Well, I think he like that. It's quite a good. I mean, they're not friends; they don't hang out, but he's he has a good relationship with King. Because King has praised his writing, so he really appreciated that.
Curious what he thought of a American tabloid. Wonder if he read it when he was doing 11/22/63.
I'm sure he loves that. Yeah, no, yeah, Stephen King, loves those Underworld USA novels and what Alroy did there with historical fiction.
Yeah, it's uh, there's a line from one of his books that one of my friends was telling me about it. I think it's I paid a dear and savage price to live in history, something like that.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good one. That's Bloods a Rover.
Mm-hmm.
But I think formulations of it have occurred in a number of Alroy's works. Um, yeah, that's very good. Yeah, again, that comes back to, is Alroy a moral writer? In terms of, yes, he is, um, because there will always be a kind of punishment for these sins of man, and yet he is also a realist. He knows that pull is irresistible. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
who wouldn't want to? That's why people can live vicariously through his novels, because who wouldn't want to be, some sort of kind of agent of history, making their mark on their time, for good or ill. I think most of us kind of want that in our lives. Well,
uh,
I mean, people are always saying, "I'd like to change the world," right?
yeah, that's true. Yeah, yeah. No, it's yeah, it's yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's always kind of I mean it's interesting because like a lot of his like more I guess you want to call 'em moral characters even get punished as well. Like Danny Upshaw definitely comes to mind from The Big Nowhere.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that was the first novel I
He's also
read that
really
had.
fascinated with gay men. Like gay men just I guess just blows no pun
Mhm.
intended just blows Elroy's mind.
Well, Elroy had gay experiences, very fleeting.
Oh.
He details them in My Dark Places. It was one instance, well, one boy. It was a case of mutual masturbation,
Oh,
uh,
jeez.
um, which is of course quite common. But he's very, very candid about that. So, and he has lots of gay friends. So, I was going to say, The Big Noah was my first book I read that portrayed homosexuality in that kind of more sympathetic light. Now, Ellroy's kind of cooled on the novel because he thinks Upshaw is a terrible character, which he is in many ways. He's kind of he screws people over in his quest. He's very, very single-minded. But I know a
He's
lot of people
I
find
kind of view him as like Ed Exley, but he doesn't have Ed Exley's like he doesn't have his like
political antenna.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yes.
yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, yeah. I mean, there were a lot of ambitious men in the LA Quartet in terms of, the police
Mhm.
is the LAPD, particularly at that time, was a very politicized institution. So you needed to know how to play politics to advance yourself. Um, and ironically, in the 90s, Ellroy had quite the relationship with the LAPD. I mean,
Yeah,
he became
he has
friends with a
friends
lot
who
of
are
cops,
cops. Yeah, like
a lot of cops, yeah, and
um
LA sheriffs as well. Yeah.
yeah, like I think in um I don't want to pull out my copy of My Dark Places at the moment, but Bill Stoner, I think is the guy's name.
Yeah, Bill Stoner is a great great guy. Yeah, he was a Los Angeles sheriff, and it was Stoner who Ellroy investigated his mother's murder with. That's the basis of My Dark Places. They went and treated it like a cold case and tried to investigate the murder of Gene Ellroy to the best extent they could. And he and Stoner became very very close. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. He dedicated one of his books to him, if I remember right.
that was the Cold 6000, and they're not close anymore. But
Oh, that sucks. Like
yeah, yeah, I know. I was a bit disappointed too, but
did you talk to him for the? Is he still with us? Did you talk to him
yeah,
for the book?
yeah, I did. Yeah, and he's a wonderful, wonderful guy. He is a gentleman,
Mm-hmm.
Bill Stoner, one of nature's gentlemen, and he was very appreciative of the time he spent with Ellroy and Ellroy's kindnesses to his family. He said, I want to be very, very clear about that. And he is a great policeman. Someone who also knows Stoner put it very well to me. And I'm just going to steal it and use it in the show. But um, Stoner is very, very sensitive for a policeman,
Mm.
for a police detective. Maybe a lot are, but they don't always show it because we have this vision of, particularly Los Angeles policemen as being these right wing or very conservative figures, almost
Hard
kind of
edged.
brutal. Yeah, yeah. And Stoner is just very sensitive and a very empathetic man. He understands human nature and he doesn't judge people for anything they've done in well, obviously we all have a little bit of judgment in us, but like
Mm.
he's just a very empathetic soul. And I really appreciated that. And when you get to talk to these people, it really comes through. And I, and I think, yeah, although they're not close anymore, I think Ellroy and Stoner really mutually benefited from being in each other's lives.
Yeah, I saw Stoner in which was kind of a pain in the ass to go through because there's the book Stoner by John Williams.
Oh yeah,
And the guy's name is also William Stoner, so it's just like, oh my gosh, can I see what this dude looks like? Can I get
yeah,
that? And I realized he was in the Feast of Death. I'm like, oh, there he is. That's what he looks like.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
There was a really beautiful moment in that documentary where he was talking about, when he was investigating Elroy's mom's murder, and and they were looking at a dress, I think, and he just goes, I remember that dress. And Stoner was like, well, for the first time, I saw a man kind of falling in love with his mom.
yeah. Oh yeah, that was heartrending. He, yeah. I mean, when you when you think of those moments, and obviously Stone has told that story a few times, new details come to you that that you don't always remember first time round. And he said one of the things Elroy said when he saw the dress was, "I can smell her." You know,
Oh.
You could smell his mother's scent, just the everyday scent that we had on the dress. That dress just triggered 1,000 memories, and that was tough, especially when you're dealing with a guy who's suppressed the trauma for a long, long time. I know doing that book, My Dark Places, kind of unlocked a lot of that trauma. Um, and maybe it was time, it was time because you can't suppress trauma forever. You've got to confront it at some point.
Yeah, I mean,
But it was a tough period.
you're gonna be scarred by something like that. If depending on what kind of relationship you had, and from
Yeah.
what I've read, they had a difficult, we'll say, relationship.
Very difficult. Yeah, very difficult. But Ellroy, with hindsight, realizes that she was the better parent of the two, of much better than his father. But oddly enough, actually, Helen Canode and Erica Schickel, two women in Ellroy's life, who don't like each other, but they did have one thing in common. They said they didn't like Jean Ellroy as a mother, and they felt that she had treated Ellroy very badly. But, she was a disciplinarian. His father was really lax.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe she was too much of a disciplinarian, but she was very adamant that he'd go to school on time, do his work, do his homework. So she made a lot of the right calls. And then when she was killed, Ellroy lost that. He lost that discipline in his life for many years until he got to the point where he had to self-impose it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, somewhere I think he's even talked about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, no, yeah, that's a good documentary. I like watching that from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also a
It's
good
very
introduction to the Ellroy mystique, if you will. I don't know what to call it.
good. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can't think of an author who's had, or at least a living author, who's had so many documentaries. That's one of several. There's one called White Jazz by Nicola Black. There's one called just James Ellroy doing crime fiction by two Austrian filmmakers. Then there was a French documentary. There's one coming out called James Ellroy versus LA, which is coming out next year.
Yeah, I heard
mean,
about that.
so
I'm like,
many.
another one? Jeez.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then again, I guess, David Lynch had a couple of documentaries made about him, so I guess it makes sense. It's not unusual.
Well, at one point, there were numerous companies bidding for a documentary on Ellroy, and he's always cooperative. But I think at one point there were so many companies, he said, "Whoever lands the contract first, I'll cooperate with," because there was only going to be so many films made. So, yeah, I guess that was at the height of his fame, which I think is probably in the 90s. I mean, of course, he's still very famous today, but yeah.
It's
I
like
think in the
prime.
90s.
It's prime demon dog. Ellroy.
Indeed, yeah. Indeed. That's a good way of
Call
putting
it that.
it. Yeah.
I will ask, because you're talking about your show.
Sure.
Yeah, Ellroy reads. What are some of your favorite books that you've read from that list of Ellroy's books that he's talked about and really enjoys?
So many. The first show I did was on The Fan Club by Irving Wallace.
Mm-hmm.
And that was an incredible book. Then, ironically, only a few weeks ago, I did an episode on John Fowles' The Collector, which was published prior to The Fan Club, and I found the two books so similar, really, really similar. That's okay. I mean, authors take influences, but I was really, that whole story about the captive woman and the obsessed man who's trying to make her fall in love with him, trying to mold her in his image. I mean, now it reads as pure misogyny. But I mean, Ellroy was just very obsessed with that idea. Anyway, a few more titles. Epic books like From Here to Eternity, which I mentioned, by James Jones.
Mm-hmm.
They're big reads, but they're worth your time. And, oh, gosh. Chandler, so I did The Lady in the Lake, because even though Ellroy has kind of disavowed Chandler, I'm like, if at one point he was an influence on Ellroy, then I feel that that is something I want to.
Well, he's from
Um,
L.A., isn't he? So I mean, you kind of
yeah,
have to read Chandler at some point if you're from, because
Chandler, Ross MacDonald, yeah, Hammett, Red Harvest. So many great novels. When Ellroy goes abroad, I mean, Ruth Randall. Um, uh,
I actually read your
Gomez
article where
Bell.
he talked about his fondness for Dashiell Hammett,
Oh yes,
um,
yeah.
which I guess is also kind of fascinating because um, Hammett was very ardently left wing,
Mm,
and Elroy, well, you say he is conservative, so it's not all just demon dog getting a
yeah,
rise out of people.
yeah. Well, in a sense, it's that left wing, right wing crossover where they agree on what the system is.
Mm-hmm.
They agree it's corrupt and that it's kind of serving an elite. But Hammett sees a kind of socialist solution, almost a socialist utopian solution. Perhaps Hammett was more ironic in that, or perhaps Hammett was more of a realist in terms of how you changed it. Because I think back then in the age of McCarthy, what people didn't, what McCarthy didn't realize is that communism was a very broad term that
Mm-hmm.
a lot of Americans, the Communist Party meant a lot of different things to a lot of different Americans. But Alroy is definitely more of a realist, and he's like, you can tweak the system, you can reform it, but man will always be fallen, and therefore there's not much. There's not that much. There's only so many reforms you can make. And Alroy loves Red Harvest because he sees that as the ultimate depiction of corruption, and um, actually the relentless grind of corruption.
Mm.
That is a hyper violent novel. It's one violent death after another.
Yeah, it's the one. That's the one with the Yojimbo plot. Yeah, that's the one where like Yojimbo and like Miller's Crossing and great films like that. That's where they kind of
Yeah,
got that plot structure from, if I'm correct.
yeah, yeah. Well, the fictional Monroe town in it, Poisonville, was actually based on Hamid's own experiences as a Pinkerton detective.
Mm-hmm.
Other experiences he had. There was a rumor at one point that he was offered a murder contract. The murder was not carried out. But
Damn.
yeah, thankfully, or not thankfully, I don't know. Um, but yeah, other experiences he had firsthand, or ones that he picked up. I mean, the tragedy of Hammett is that his writing career was actually very brief, and Alroy lives to write. I mean, Hammett practically gave up writing when his alcoholism kind of got out of hand,
Mm-hmm.
and he found like it was easier to combine his vice, which was alcoholism, with his political pursuits. I think writing a book just became far too much for him.
Mm.
Um, and he was lucky in one sense because the Thin Man series, that was the big Hollywood franchise of its day, almost like a Marvel franchise, and
Mm-hmm.
that kept paying out almost to the end of his life. It was huge on radio as well. But with Alroy, it's not so much about the money of writing, although of course that's always nice if you actually get some. But he writes to exercise those demons, and he lives to write. I think any life where Alroy cannot write, he wouldn't want to live that life. He'd say it's time to check out.
Yes, he seems like a very driven person.
Very,
Um,
very.
to the point, like I remember my dad was telling me a few weeks ago. He was talking about this thing he had heard where he was talking about either you're interested, you're committed, or you're obsessed with it. And I would say because we were just talking about stuff I like doing, and I kind of thought of Elroy when he brought up what obsession means, because he's like, it means like you dedicate yourself completely to this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's like that when he's writing a book. He will get it exactly to his vision. Now, whether that is perfection or not, it's his vision. He's so driven. And then, ironically, I remember this quite vividly. He told me after writing Perfidia, a typical epic novel of his, just as it was about to come out, his editor, Edward Castemeyer, said, I think Perfidia is going to be a really important book, James. And Ellroy just turned to him and said, no, I don't think so. And I think what he meant by that is it's the next one. It's always the next one. He was already moving on to the next obsession.
Yeah, I heard that one was kind of divisive, little
Very,
bit.
yeah, very. I mean, actually, Perfidia and This Storm, when he moved to a wartime setting, and of course they're prequels, so they feature all the characters of the Los Angeles Quartet, like Dudley Smith and
Mm-hmm.
Ed Exley and etc. And some new ones, some good new ones like Hideo Ishida and Kay Lake, the old characters. I think, well, the problem with prequels is you can't kill certain characters off, and in crime fiction that kind of nullifies a lot of suspense. But I don't think Ellroy, those to me are not my favorite Ellroy novels because I think the wartime setting wasn't his strongest suit. Even though he was very interested in war profiteering and that sort of thing, as he put it, war is an opportunity for some people. Some people got very rich off it, and he was very interested in that. But I don't think that quite sustained them the way his best novels have.
Yeah, it's yeah. I mean, I don't know. I haven't read Perfidia yet. Though again,
Okay.
I read I read Grant Nebel's uh article about James Ellroy, and he briefly mentioned Perfidia, and I'm like, oh, that's okay. Okay.
Well, yeah. I mean,
Those
I
are
would
some
say.
choices.
Well, I don't want to speak for Grant, but I think those of us who've been following Ellroy for 30 years or more haven't been so enamored of the recent novels. I think some of the readers who are new to Ellroy, some of the younger readers, are quite big fans of these recent novels. That's just a kind of straw poll opinion that I formed. Um, I think his Fred Otash novels more recently, The Enchanters,
Mm-hmm.
when he moved back to a kind of 1960s setting and he moved back to LA as a boom town, a post-war LA
Mm-hmm.
boom town in peacetime. I think he felt much more assured and comfortable. He was back on home territory, and I think and I think Ellroy would say he's probably relieved he made that transition now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember being kind of thrown off. I'm like, yeah, wasn't this like, wasn't he trying to do like a quintet this time instead of a quartet? And
Yeah,
now he's doing
it's
this novels about this PI. Oh, okay.
it's gone through several permutations. Yeah, yeah. So I think he's trying to tie Perfidia in this storm, even though he goes through a kind of 20-year leap to get to Fred Otash, but he's trying to suggest they're all part of one series.
All right, that's a choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, I don't have any opinions on it. I haven't read any of these books yet. But yeah, no, I think with uh, it's interesting seeing a writer grow, I guess, over time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I know James is 77 now, so he knows he's got his next few books mapped out because you know I don't want to sound morbid or anything, but obviously when you reach that age, you do start to think about mortality.
Mm-hmm.
And in a sense, I think he already feels he's cheated death. A lot of addicts feel this way, that in terms of like that they had a second chance. They could have
Mm-hmm.
been killed. Yes, that Ellroy definitely could have been killed by his addictions and
Mm-hmm.
other problems. So he is grateful for every day. And he has got a couple more or a few more novels in him. Uh, and I can't wait to see them.
Yeah. I will ask. So I read the Amazon sample. Has he really called you a slimy limey in the past?
Well, that was just joking around, in
Oh.
terms of like that's how we'd talk. Yeah, yeah, and that was well, the way I put it, that quote you're referring to is in the introduction to "Love Me First in Danger,"
Mm-hmm.
where I was talking a little bit about where I was and how I'd got to this point of writing his biography, and I write. But enough talking about myself because I can feel James Ellroy hovering over my shoulder and saying, "Steve, you slimy limey, stop talking about yourself and get to the part about me." And then I write, "Here goes," and then it's chapter one, right into his life story. So yeah, I mean, we joked around a lot and we had some great laughs. He is a very funny guy and can be very self-deprecating. And sometimes he doesn't mind playing the buffoon. At other times, he got kind of very almost stentorian about his stature in American literature, and other days just want to goof around.
Yeah, I kind of going back to my point about crime fiction I was making earlier. It's been interesting seeing crime fiction, noir in particular, begin to gain a sort of more respect, if you will. Though I guess that's not new because there are writers like Graham Greene who wrote what he called entertainments, and then he wrote his actual novels. Um, though I'm actually quite fond of Brighton Rock. I think it's a great book.
Yeah, yeah, that's a classic. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I'm,
Then
I'm
the
curious what
Greens
you
are
make
good.
of this, since you're not only a biographer of Elroy, but you're a scholar of hard boiled fiction.
Well, what do I make of Graham Greene, or what do I make?
No, what do you make of this, like of like crime fiction being more um I kind of its position in the literary world, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at. It's the question I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think it has reached the position it has because of the hard work of authors who have transcended the genre, many of which we've mentioned: Lehane, Alroy, P.D. James, and also because of the work of some academics who've deigned to take it seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And now there are universities in the UK, East Anglia, and also Strathclyde, and probably a few others that offer crime writing degrees, which are usually a
Oh
mixture
wow,
of,
okay.
yeah, usually a mixture of creative writing and also analysis of crime fiction as a form.
Yeah, I mean,
And
I have a friend. His name's A.P. Canavan, who that he has a degree for that, but that's in fantasy literature. That's not a crime
well, yeah,
fiction
that was
literature.
going to be my next comment in terms of similar things have happened with speculative fiction and fantasy fiction in terms of what started out as something more of niche writing and wasn't taken seriously by academics has over the decades begun to taken very seriously in scholarly circles and is part of the academy now. And that's a very good there's a very good parallel.
Yeah, like I'm always surprised by the influence that someone like a Raymond Chandler has had on even mainstream literary figures like Michael Chabon and Jonathan Lethem. If you want to call Jonathan Lethem mainstream literature, because he writes a lot of genre fiction. Um,
Yeah, well, I think Chandler would be surprised if we could bring him back from the dead just for a day. I think he'd be astounded, but in the best possible way. I think obviously it's every author's dream. They want to make an impact, and Chandler, who was writing to entertain, and which he did very, very well, also managed social commentary, or whatever you want to call it, all of the things that some critics used to kind of exclusively reserve for literary fiction, has been achieved by Chandler and his peers and his successors, and I think it's absolutely great.
Yeah, and you definitely see it getting more respect nowadays, which I find quite good. As someone who generally likes genre fiction more than say literary. No, I mean I read literary fiction.
Hmm.
I try not to discriminate when I read, but we have our preferences, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. We have our preferences, and I don't know, maybe it's the internet, but like a lot of these, a lot of snobbery around literature is broken down, and I think that's a good thing. Um, I mean, one of the things people don't always get about Alroy is like he likes a lot of change. He's not keen on every change in the publishing industry, but a lot of change he does like. He started doing a lot more internet examples, but like for a guy who says I live in the past, I live in the 1950s. And in some respects, that's right. He doesn't have a cell phone. He
I was
doesn't
gonna
have a
ask if that
computer.
was true because again with Elroy sometimes I'm not sure if he's just like bullshitting or if he's being serious.
A lot of it's true. He doesn't have a mobile phone. He just had a landline. I would ring him on his landline. When we spoke via computer, it would be by Hallen's computer because he doesn't have his own computer. All of his novels are handwritten.
Excuse me.
And oh, bless you. And then they'd be sent off to a typist. He's worked with numerous typists over the years. Yeah, he still writes
That must
everything
be a
handwritten.
that must be a pain in the ass to do.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, trust me, because he doesn't. He writes in block capitals, but it's still sometimes illegible. Um, um, and there was one
That's
funny moment where he'd been friends with Jonathan Kellerman,
mm,
the author, and so I wanted to interview Kellerman, and Kellerman said, "First, I want to get. Can you get me James's permission?" Which is a perfectly reasonable thing to ask for. I said, "Okay, I'll try." And Elroy wrote him a letter, and Kelman couldn't read it, so I had to translate it. It was, yeah, some of his handwriting. I mean, my handwriting is pretty bad, but
oh
wait
well,
till you see Elroy's.
but I am kind of fascinated by this trend of genre and literary, if you want to call it that, kind of blending together now. Though I guess that's not. I guess that's not new. I mean, a lot of great novels are have genre trappings. Moby Dick is an adventure story, ostensibly. Um,
Yeah.
as is books like The Adventures of Tom. So I'm going off. I'm sure there's British examples, but Heart of Darkness as well. Um,
Hmm. Yeah, Conrad. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Actually, my master's degree was in Victorian literature.
oh,
But I made a big leap because my wife, who's then my fiance, said, don't do a PhD on a Victorian. First of all, it's all been done, and secondly, she knew I
that's a
had this
keeper right
passion.
there.
Yeah, she knew I had this passion for James Ellroy's work. My feeling was that there wasn't enough academic work on Ellroy, and she was kind of like, "Don't worry about that now. Just follow your instincts." And she was right. She was absolutely right. And I never thought like doing that PhD to being his biographer. I never figured it would work out that way. But it did, and I'm just really, really grateful. And then the fact that he kind of took me in, that was very trusting of him. Um, Man, and I know I kind of know a lot of other academics in the Elroy circles, um, because I suppose there's only maybe 2 dozen of us at most who are doing a lot of academic work on Elroy.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and yeah, we've all got to know each other. And at one point, I organised a James Ellroy conference, the first academic conference on James Ellroy, and that took place in Liverpool. And we had people come from all over Australia, Germany, Brazil, It was nice.
Yeah, that sounds fun. Just talking about James Ellroy. Like, what were
It's,
topics of conversation in this conference?
um, well, it was about his work. I mean, they all gave papers, and it was so interesting to hear other perspectives because Elroy's plots are so labyrinthine that someone would be talking about white jazz, and I'd be like, oh, I completely forgot about that subplot. I'd
I have that
completely
with
forgot about
L.A.
the character.
Confidential. Sometimes I'll read. I'm like, there's like two serial killers in this. How did I forget about that?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. But someone could build a whole paper around that character, uh, or a whole paper around a feminist reading or a postmodernist reading, it was just a wonderful time. And in fact, that conference that evolved into an anthology of essays that I edited on Ellroy, called it The Big Somewhere.
Very nice.
And that was my first book with Bloomsbury, and that gave me the connections at Bloomsbury. Bloomsbury eventually published the biography, so yeah, it all kind of connected.
Yeah, it's funny. I was kind of looking around for like the big somewhere. I couldn't find it on Amazon for whatever. They do have Love Me Fierce and Danger though.
Yeah, yeah, we'll get on it. I can't wait to hear your opinion of it. Let Me First in Danger, The Life of James Ellroy. I mean, I always get good feedback from it, from Ellroy readers, from lovers of literary biography. And the high point for me was when it won the Edgar Award
Oh,
for best
that must have
biography.
been great.
Yeah, that was a wonderful, wonderful moment, going to New York at the banquet. By pure good luck, I was on the same table as Colson Whitehead.
Oh, that must have been
And
fun.
oh yeah, really charming guy, really
You know
engaging.
what's funny? I actually started his book. I actually started his book, The Underground Railroad, this year,
Yeah, I
and
read that one.
I stopped reading it because I realized I was just forcing myself to read it, and it was weird because I was liking it. So I don't know what
Yeah.
happened there, but I've heard he's also written some very good crime novels. I have a friend of mine who
Well,
quite
I think
enjoyed. I think it was called The
Nickel
Crook Manifesto.
Yeah, there's that one. I mean, I read The Underground Railroad after meeting him. I was so charmed by him. He's a really great guy. And now Nickel Boys has been made into a film, quite well reviewed. But he's a two-time Pulitzer winner. And in fact, he was probably the biggest celebrity there that night. Everybody was gravitating around him. And I know that must be exhausting when you're a room full of 100 people, everyone wants to talk to you, but he was really polite. He listened to everybody, shook everybody's hand. And yeah, I can't say enough good things about him.
Yeah. I'd like to try it again because I was liking it. I don't know what happened there, so
Yeah.
But I've heard his crime novels are very good.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've read them, but
I've only read The Underground Railroad.
okay.
And I read that after meeting him. So it's kind of like, because I meet quite a lot of authors now, if I really like them, I'll read their work. If I don't like them, no, no matter how good a writer they are, I know I'll be reading thinking, this guy was a jerk. I couldn't get that out of my head. So it does color your perspective somewhat.
I mean, hey, anyone could have had a bad day for sure.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But
Yeah.
that's funny you brought up Jordan Harper because again, I'm reading She Writes Shotgun at the moment, and I'm enjoying that. It's kind of interesting seeing how James Ellroy has he's kind of created his own style, if you will. Where you read a book and you're
Mhm.
like, oh, it's kind of like Ellroy a little bit. I mean, I see that with She Writes Shotgun. I'm also reading a book called A Brief History of Seven Killings, which I mean is basically Ellroy in Jamaica, if you want to call it that. I don't know if it's quite on the money, but it's very has that wide scope of some of his best work, and also has
Well,
a lot of
yeah,
slang.
I think it's very gratifying to Alroy to know that he's had this impact on literature. I think as a reader, he would judge a book entirely by its merits. If he felt it was derivative of him, then he wouldn't be hot on it at all. If he felt like there was an element of his work, but it has a distinctive voice, then he'd be full of praise. I mean, I think what's interesting now is that some crime novels, particularly those set in a distinct period like the 1950s, are coming with trigger warnings regarding the language
Wow.
um,
I bet he
used
loves that.
because yeah, well, I think he's adamant that his novel shouldn't come with trigger warnings. I mean, maybe his name on the cover is the trigger warning. It's both barrels really. But yeah, I know that'll be one element of modern publishing he just can't stand at all. But
I was about to
he's a
say, yeah,
smart guy.
his work drops like racial slurs, like it's not going out of style.
Uh,
It's crazy.
I mean, maybe there's part of him that thinks there is still there is still a market for being kind of radically on PC out there, and he's going to fill it.
Well, I don't know. It's almost like he takes the attitudes and sensibilities in noir and just kind of amps it up to 11.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean,
'Cause
I don't know what he would think of something like a brief history of 7 killings, because a lot of it is in Jamaican patois. He might, I don't know if he would get it, but I am reminded a lot of his his affinity for slang, and also the kind of wide reaching of how it how of what it covers, I should say.
Yeah, well, I think he might actually love that. I mean, who knows? I mean, the way I did the show is, it was me looking back at conversations I had with him about his favorite books. Most of his favorite books stem from either childhood or as a very young man,
Mm.
because I think that is the time when you are, emotionally and intellectually like a sponge, just taking everything in, reading emotionally, and as you age, you begin to read a bit more academically. Um, so it's harder really to pick favorites at that kind of age. Um, but I in fact he went through a period where he wasn't reading a lot at all.
Yeah, I think I read an interview of his once where he's like, I have a hard time reading fiction because, oh, damn it. Uh, it's hard not to compare myself to them, which,
Yeah, yeah,
okay.
and as he put it once, I don't want to live in words. He usually writes in the morning, so like a 4 or 5 hour session, usually from like 5 a.m. till 10, or maybe a bit later, 6 a.m. to 11, or something like that. And then he's got to unwind, and he doesn't necessarily want to read in that downtime. Um, but it was actually Helen who got him back into reading. She felt it was important for him. She's had given a few nudges in his career here and there. She wanted him to go back to a more kind of explicated style, less pared down language, less alliteration and that sort of thing. And I think she was right.
He does love alliteration, I've
He
noticed.
does, yeah, yeah. And some of that reads very well at the book signings and that sort of thing. He performs it very well. I think when you internalize as a reader, some of that stuff can grate. Um, so yeah, that divides people, including his fans.
Yeah, I sometimes wonder if he's someone who needs somebody to rein him in.
Yeah, well, I mean, he has very good editors. Alfred A. Knopf, some of the best. Edward Castemeyer. I mean, the editor in chief for many years before he passed away, Sonny Mehta, he and Ellroy were close. Sonny was kind of a very guarded figure, and Ellroy is obviously Ellroy, but they had a very good working relationship. So yeah, he's definitely benefited from good editors over the years. Yeah.
Yeah. I was actually listening to an interview with Jordan Harper again, full circle. Jordan Harper, where I think he also has the same Nat Sobel, I think is the guy's name.
Oh yeah, Nat Sobel was Ellroy's agent for many
Oh, it's
years.
his agent. That what? Sorry, I thought he was an editor. What am I talking about?
Well, I mean, is a very hands-on agent. So I can, and I know of numerous examples where Nat did step into more of an editing role. He and Ellroy were actually over 3 decades. That professional relationship lasted. It came to a very abrupt end.
Oh
And
no! Hope it wasn't a
unfortunately,
falling out.
yep. Oh yeah, another one. Yeah,
Oh no!
straight 10. And they haven't spoken since, which is sad. But it, it was
Did you
one of
talk to
those
him
things.
for the book, Nat Sobel?
Well, I tried to, but unfortunately, I think the emotions are a bit too raw still. So he wouldn't talk to me directly, but I talked to a lot of people who know him.
Mm.
And obviously, I talked to Ellroy about their relationship. And Ellroy kind of put it in perspective. It was a very, very, very productive collaboration for many years, but it kind
Do you
of
think it
been,
was just they got sick of each other, or is it something a little
yeah,
more than that?
yeah. Well, that's a good way of putting it. I think, though, numerous people who are close to Nat said Ellroy treated him rather shabbily in the way he ended it. He should have flown out there, taken him out to lunch, and say, "Hey, it's time for a change." But he didn't do that. It ended very, very abruptly. So, I mean, I'm not going to cry over spilt milk or anything, but it ended in a way that left Sobel quite shaken.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually in the book, in Love Me, Fierce and
Oh
Danger.
man, you're really enticing me to read this book now.
Yeah. Well, on the day Nat Sobel was dropped by Ellroy, he rang up Otto Penzler, his friend and famous editor, and said, "I've had the best news and I've had the worst news. The best news was that one of Nat's clients, the guy who wrote The Sympathizer, the Vietnamese author."
Oh yeah. I know what you're talking about. I don't know the guy's name. It's
Yeah,
blanking me at the
I'm worried
moment.
I might mispronounce it. He was the Nobel or the Pulitzer Prize.
Mm-hmm.
It had been announced he'd won the Pulitzer Prize, but so Nat was delighted, and then he gets the news that Ellroy's dropped him, and Nat thought Ellroy was family. He treated Ellroy more like a son in a way, but well, what can I say? It's complicated between human beings and relationships,
Damn, how
both
old is Nat
professional and personal.
Sobel? Because
Oh, Nat is old. He's up there. Yeah,
jeez.
yeah. Because Ellroy's no spring chicken.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no. Well, we've been going for a while, and I'm actually getting hungry. I haven't eaten yet today.
Okay. Yeah, me too.
Um, but thank you so much for giving some of your time to talk about your work and James Ellroy
Oh, my
stuff, and
pleasure.
have us have a good time talking about crime books.
Yeah.
I don't talk
Thanks
about
for having me
crime
on.
as much as I'd like to on this channel, so I'm glad I got somebody to do it with. And hey, if I ever
Yeah.
cover more Elroy novels on my channel, I will keep you in mind for sure. I
Thank
quite
you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
I quite enjoyed
And
our time together.
yeah, it's been fun. It's been real, and I really appreciate it. Okay, and thanks to all your viewers and all your listeners too. We've given you a great episode.
Well, before we go, if you have any social media, I like to do this before the end. If you have any social media, feel free to share it.
So my handle on X is at Ellroy Reader, and my YouTube show is called Ellroy Reads. It's quite easy to find, and obviously, yeah, come to the show, subscribe, like, share, comment. It's very interactive, and the magnum opus, the book that the years of my life, is Love Me, Fierce and Danger: The Life of James Ellroy, published by Bloomsbury, Edgar winning. And if you take a few dollars out of your salary to purchase this book, I'd very, very much appreciate it.
Yes, give this guy some views. He needs them. He's doing some good
Thank
work.
you. Yeah, thank you. Thank
Anyway,
you.
again, Steven, thank you so much for coming on here and hanging out with me for a while. And we should do this
Anytime.
again.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay.
All right. Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. And until next time.
Okay.
Yep.